Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, as many of you have expressed, I share the grave concern about the ongoing bomb threats against HBCUs throughout the country. The FBI has announced that it is investigating these threats as racially or ethnically motivated violent extremism. And currently, right-wing extremist violence poses a huge threat to the general public, and particularly to HBCUs and other public institutions that serve significant minority populations. My first question is for Mr. Young. Mr. Young, the administration released a national strategy to counter domestic terrorism in June of last year. The administration hoped to bolster information sharing between federal, state, and local law enforcement. I'd like to know what unintended or unexpected barriers have you encountered while implementing this strategy, if any, and an overall assessment of how implementation has gone.
Thank you, Senator. I would first like to say that I will get back to you with precise information on any barriers. Initially, we remain very close with our federal partners. We utilize our Office of Partner Engagement, our Joint Terrorism Task Force, our other law enforcement task forces in the field. And we also utilize information sharing through our fusion centers to make sure that we're not only getting out raw information on threats and tips, and that we're sharing threat to life, what we call threat to life guardians, but we also are passing, ensuring that our other law enforcement partners are getting either the classified, briefings on these threats. We bring them in. If they don't have the security clearance at the time, we give them one-time read-ins, but we make sure that we are sharing information across all levels.
Okay. Thank you. Look forward to the follow-up. On a different topic and a follow-up to something that Senator Ossoff was mentioning. Last week, the Senate Judiciary Committee, where we're both members, heard testimony from Rabbi Charlie Citron Walker of the congregation Beth Israel in Colleyville, Texas. The rabbi highlighted his experience with active shooters and preparedness seminars offered by the Anti-Defamation League, the FBI, and local law enforcement as being very helpful in that situation. I also believe that partnerships similar to those mentioned by the rabbi are critical to building an atmosphere that ensures the safety and security for those gathering to practice their religion. Mr. Coleman, this question is for you. Rabbi Citron Walker credits the training that he received in helping him survive the hostage situation. Currently, can you comment on the infrastructure, the capacity, the resources that exist? Is it ample enough to provide security trainings for all houses of worship, or at least those who may be interested across the country? And if not, how else can the federal government improve the accessibility and availability of such trainings?
Thank you for the question, Senator. And I am deeply appreciative to the rabbi and many other faith leaders who have talked about the importance of training and preparedness. I had the opportunity to spend some time with the rabbi and other faith leaders actually last week in Keller, Texas, right outside of Colleyville, where we had joined the Multi-Faith Neighbors Network to talk specifically about some of the preparedness training and resources available, not just from the federal government, but from our state and local partners as well. As part of our efforts for the Center for Faith-Based Neighborhood Partnerships, in addition to promoting preparedness and training such as active shooter training that's provided by our colleagues at CISA and the FBI, the DHS Center is also looking forward to building partnerships directly with organizations like the Anti-Defamation League, the Sikh Coalition, Multi-Faith Neighbors Network, Southern Baptist, and others, because we ultimately know that those faith-based organizations are best positioned to take a lot of the federal programs and language and put it in a way that's more accessible to faith and community leaders. I think in addition to helping to build partnerships from a federal perspective and to help support our faith-based organizations directly, we also need to have continued investment for our state and local government counterparts as well. Many of the trainings that are happening day to day in communities are led by local law enforcement, local fire, and local and county emergency managers. And so in addition to continuing to build an infrastructure, working across our federal family to deliver programs through our protective security advisors that help with facility assessments, particularly for places of worship, I think that it would be encouraging and a helpful addition to help support some of our local first responders who are also going to be doing some of the day-to-day work to provide practical information and steps that are most relevant for their communities.
Okay. Thank you. Look forward to working with you to continue to advance those efforts in California and beyond. Follow-up question for Mr. Logan. Now, Congress has provided increased funding for security grants for nonprofits. I know that's also been discussed in the hearing already. My specific question is acknowledging that in some communities, vulnerable communities, communities with maybe not the best historical experience with law enforcement agencies, where there is that lack of trust and confidence, including but not limited to immigrant communities, for example, where there's a hesitancy in applying for funds or participating in some of these programs. How can DHS continue to outreach, build these partnerships, and advance the purpose of providing not just grants, but the training, and remove these barriers to communication, or basically overcome the hesitancy in some more vulnerable communities?
Senator, thank you for that question. It's certainly an issue that we're well aware of and working through. It's the kinds of partnerships that we have with Mr. Coleman's office that help us address those issues. There's no substitute for face-to-face communication. Part of the challenge is helping communities understand what these programs are and what they're not. I think part of some of the hesitancy that we see in communities and working with the Department of Homeland Security is a skepticism about what we're about why we're coming into their community and what we're really after. And so helping to explain the purpose of the program, helping to explain why it's FEMA that's administering these programs, and then again building on the trust that Mr. Coleman's shop is creating, I think will help to break down some of those barriers. But again, there's no substitute for face-to-face engagement.
Okay, and just as part of our follow-up, want to get a better sense after today's hearing on, how responsive we are to community leaders, organizations, other entities that approach you for that type of partnership or training or information, but how we overlay that with knowing where there's risk, knowing where there's vulnerability, where there may be threats, and if there's leaders, organizations, et cetera, serving those communities that aren't reaching out to you, how we are proactive in reaching out, knowing full well that overcoming the hesitancy, skepticism may be part of the work here, but no less important. Thank you, Mr. Chair.